Imagine a game you've played where every magical item was useful or was an upgrade to your character's equipment. That game is not World of Warcraft. Part of the charm of old game design was to include items that were not so good. That way, the good items looked even better. WoW Classic is a prime example of a game that invoked this philosophy. Whether it was done intentionally or not is up for debate. Tons of buy on equip epic gear exists within Classic World of Warcraft, and today we're going to rank them all based on their general usefulness. When looking at these items, I asked myself a few questions. How many classes get use out of them? For how long? And do better items exist that are easier to obtain? Starting off on a D tier, we have Black Skull Shield. This is an item that only has 5 stamina, 10 spirit as a shield, which could be useful for an elemental shaman in theory, but in a world where Aegis' Scarlet Commander exists, and how generally more useful this item is, I don't see any case use for ever wanting to purchase this. Just go to Scarlet Monastery. Blade of Hannah is a two-handed sword that has a strange stat distribution of plus 11 to everything. There is literally no class in the game that really benefits from having every single stat except for maybe like a druid or a paladin to some extent, but with the top end speed only being 2.1, this sword is very fast. Instants will not hit very hard with it. There are 100 other examples of swords you might want to use in place of this guy. Brain Hacker is another two-handed weapon that has absolutely nothing going for it, with a whopping 2.1 speed, no stats, and a chance on hit that hits a target for 200-300 damage, lowers intel by 25. Not only does this intel effect do nothing on NPCs, the immediate damage it does is affected by armor. This makes this absolutely useless. Do not use it. Dazzling Longsword is another one of those unfortunate items that didn't really get much in the way of itemization. This is a main hand epic sword that has a whopping 1.7 speed, which isn't terrible for tanking, I guess, but the chance on hit doesn't really do anything to help. Decreases the armor and target by 100 for 30 seconds. The invisibility effect is completely irrelevant. When you can easily get Vanquish's Sword or Sword of Omen, which both have similar DPS and better stats, I don't see any point in case which anyone would want to use this weapon. Hammer of the Northern Wind. A main hand mace with a pretty slow speed and a pretty shitty chance on hit effect. To launch a frostbolt does a whopping 20 or 30 frost. Oh my gosh, maybe Vicidius. This could be useful while I'm outside. With this main hand speed being so low, there's not a single class that's going to want to use this. Maybe for tanking, but no, there's better options. The Helm of Narv has a really interesting stat pool of agility, stamina, and spirit. This could be potentially useful in PvP for hunters or possibly a shaman, but the stat itemization of this is very unfortunate and it does not show up in the best in slot list for a single class. Hurricane! This is a bow with very fast attack speed, no stats, and a chance on hit that is largely forgettable. This thing is not even one to be used by hunters. They're looking for a very slow weapon, so their aim shots can hit like a motherfucker. You can get Verdant Keeper's aim for free out of a quest in Maraudon. Hurricane simply serves no purpose. Not even a warrior or a rogue would want this, because it has 0 stats on it. It serves no points. Please avoid. Lay of Lilies is one of those items as a kid I really wanted in vanilla because it could conjure food, and I wanted to be a mage when I was a hunter. With a whopping 10 stamina and 15 spirit, these stats don't really help anybody out, and the Lily Root is, well, a decent restoration, you know, about 600 mana and health. The stats on it and having a 1 hour cooldown just leaves a lot to be desired here. Straight to the crap list you go. Lifestone is another really interesting item that, again, unfortunately just has no real application. A 30-minute short heal on top of a whopping 10 HP 5. If a Warlock could get this for free, that might be the only class I'd be interested. If you're paying more than a couple silver for this thing, you're doing better things. I can't believe they're going for 33 gold. What the fuck? Who's using this shit? Ring of Savior is another one of those like flavor items that I really wish they had a better on-use effect. Blizzard really liked adding these in back in the day. This ring gives you a whopping 14 stam, 8 spirit, and gives you a use effect to increase armor by 300 for 10 seconds. But it's on a 30-minute cooldown. Now, if this had been only on maybe like a 1 or a 2-minute cooldown, I could see this being handy in certain pulls. But With a whopping fucking 30-minute cooldown, this isn't even the armor of, like, your fucking wrist if you're a plate armor. I don't see how or where, when, why, no. No! Blizzard, I'm getting really tired of all these epics that have a fuck ton of spirit and like nothing else on it. Can we like do something about this? There's just, I got nothing for you, man. Come on. Tauren Icebreaker, an item that is not very good at slaying Taurens. How could they let this happen? The two-handed mace has a mediocre chance of hit effect to do about 200 fireball damage, but unfortunately, if no stats, a PPM of maybe 1 at 5%, and a very fast attack speed, we have a lot of other options out there, folks. We got Rock Pounder, we got Princess Therapy Scepter. Either of these could be getting for free, and will probably serve you a lot better than this guy will. Straight to the bottom. To finish off D tier, we're going to put a Lion Homer Stormwind down here. This is a flavored trinket item that I really wish was better. It's actually an item that comes from Warcraft 3, where it's way better in that game, so it buffs the armor of your entire army by 1.5, which is pretty considerable in that game. Here, unfortunately, the only person that's going to make use of this trinket would be a tank, but it has absolutely no stats on it. And what's the point of giving armor to your party members? Like, how often are they getting hit? The mitigation of 250 armor is completely negligible for any tank wearing plate. We have things like Force of Will out there to give you a flat damage reduction for yourself, which is just far superior to this in every single way. I really wish this item was better. This could have been really cool. Starting off our C tier list, we have Alkur's Sunraiser. This is a very rare drop from enemies within raids. It's a dagger that has a very lackluster 1.3 speed, 10 fire resist, and a proc on hit to do maybe about 80 to 90 fire damage. There's just a lot better options. This isn't the worst dagger in the world. If you're strapped for options and have a lot of money, you could use this in offhand. It's not absolutely terrible, but there's things like Corehound 2, if you got Fell Striker, or even Lobotomizer. There's a lot of other epic daggers that just have better stats, unfortunately, which largely outclass this. Bloodrazor. This is a sword that is a main hand with a pretty slow speed on it, which is really only the reason I put it here in C tier. The chance on hit is pretty negligible, but the sword, for giving its level and DPS, if you can get it for pretty cheap, it's not bad in, say, like a human warrior with their sword specialization. But we have things like Flashblade, even Phantom Blade, that's giving us some serious competition. There's some swords in Zul'Farrak. You have a lot of other options, but if Bloodrazor is on the market for really cheap, it's not a terrible weapon to get you through leveling. Dwarven Hand Cannon, with its impressive triple barrels, has less than impressive stats. It's a pretty slow gun at 2.9, which hunters could use, and the chance on hit's not terrible to give you a little extra damage, like 40 or fire damage on occasional chance. The fact that it lacks any stats on it, well, hunters really want some hit chance at around this level, especially at endgame. No warrior, no rogue is going to want this. There's better crossbows and bows out there that just simply outclass a Dwarven Hand Cannon. If you can get it for really cheap, it's not a terrible placeholder until you get 60, but generally you're going to want something of hit or the bow out of MC at that point. This is kind of like a filler BOE, but it's not the worst on the list. Eye of Flame is a very unfortunate headpiece that gives a whopping 43 damage to fire spells, but the only class that can really benefit from fire damage is going to be a mage. And they can't use fire spells until like phase 4 and AQ 40 comes out and AQ 20. So while this item does show up pretty high on the list, like in phase 6 for best in slot, this is a very solid item for fire mages at that point. There's a million other items that have damage, crit, hits, affects every single spell. It's really hard to value this more than a C tier item because it's just not useful for most of vanilla, and there's only one class that can use it until they get something better at 60. That's why it's here in Seeps for me. Fiery War Axe is a level 35 Orc Warrior's wet dream, except the fact that you have Whirlwind Axe existing. In a world without Whirlwind Axe, Fiery War Axe would be a more viable weapon. It has an okay speed at 2.9 and a chance on hit to do pretty solid fire damage. But other than that, unless you can get this really cheap, Warrior's going to get Whirlwind Axe, and maybe a Paladin can make some use out of this, but it's just an okay weapon at best, and it's not really worth the money unless you're twinking at 39. Glowing Blightwood Staff is a epic staff at level 49 with a ton of intellect and stamina on it. A minor amount of spirit is some nature resistance. This staff lacks damage, and healing. That's his major issues. There's not really any class that wants to use this for damage and or for leveling. The only place you really see glowing bright with staff is in Maraudon runs when mages are boosting people because of the nature resistance. This is the sole reason I put it into C tier. Its stats are mediocre at best, but you really want the damage and hit chance or healing if you're a caster. Straight up intel and stamina just doesn't really benefit you that much in combat in vanilla. Hand of Edward the Odd is a very unique item that I'm sure most of you have probably never seen drop in your life. It is a one-hand mace that has a unique effect of letting you cast your next spell in 4 seconds instantly. This, funnily enough, works with Hearthstone, so you could be a wannabe paladin with this. Druids sometimes can make use of this if they're in melee, but not really. This is primarily for an elemental shaman to use. It has a proc rate of roughly 1 minute, roughly like a 3% chance rate. So it will come up occasionally. It's relevant in combat, probably okay in PvP, but elemental shaman's really the only one making any use out of this. There's just no other class that has a value. I'm honestly really surprised to even see one of these in the market. I'm on a not blade! This is a two-handed epic sword of a chance on hit, no stats. It is a little fast. Chance on hit is not too terrible. I guess the damage is okay. But Nightblade, unless you're like a 39 twink, is just heavily outclassed by stuff like Excalibur or Blade of the Titans. These are things you can get for a lot cheaper than Nightblade, and simply just serve their purposes better. Robes of Insight! This is an item I kind of wish was a little bit better because its flavor is pretty cool. It's a cloth chest with 25 intel, 15 stam, not bad stats for level 42, but it has a use effect which reduces the cost of your next spell within 10 seconds by 500 mana. Now this can only be used every 15 minutes. Most spells around this level cost about that much, so it's like one free spell every 15 minutes. You can't stare me in the face and tell me that this is ever going to impact your gameplay in any meaningful way. Precisely, Calibrated Broomstick. Not too much to be said about this. It's really fast. It has good 14 agility on it, which is just a stat stick for rogues, maybe warriors if they want it. But no hunter is going to want to use this. There's a lot of other options, a lot of slower guns. As much as you want that agility, it's not worth sacrificing the top damage for fucking 1.5 speed garbage. The green shield's the first of our epic BOE shields. There's a list of like 4 of them. And out of 4 of these, I think this one is definitely the worst. It's in C tier only because the stats are mediocre for its level, but even amongst the other epic shields, its armor is dramatically less. It has a chance on hit effect when you're attacked. 1% chance to raise thorns, rank 1 thorns. It reflects 3 damage. I don't need to say a whole lot more about it. It's awful. Use it in Scarlet Monastery to farm, maybe? No. Better options, use Skull Flame. The Wall of the Dead, while on paper, looks like it has pretty decent stats, and which it does. It's in C tiers that has a good amount of strength and stamina, which any warrior is going to appreciate. It also has a very high armor value by default. The only reason it's really here in C tier, because it has pretty sad equipped. When you're hit, 3% chance to increase armor by 150. This is a completely meaningless amount at that level if you're wearing plate and have a shield on. 150 for 20 seconds, even if you have this up at full time, is nothing. This does nothing to help your mitigation on such a low chance rate too. Starting off our B tier is Boots of Avoidance. On paper, these don't look that bad. You got 14 agility, 11 stamina, they're epic, they're level 40. These are things that a warrior might be interested in. They also give a whopping 2% chance to dodge an attack. The major issue of these boots is when you dodge an attack as a warrior, you're not gaining rage. Yes, you gain a little bit of mitigation from not taking the damage, but you're also not getting rage. And the threat is more of a concern than damage mitigation in vanilla. So these are in B tier because they're usable, and until you get a better pair of boots, it's fine to use. But generally you want defense, you're going to want some strength. You don't really care about this agility that much as a warrior, not for this piece. Bow of Searing Arrows is an item that pretty much only hunters are really going to want to use, but it's an epic bow at level 37 with a chance to strike your target with a searing arrow for like 20 to fire damage or so. It procs pretty often. It's got a nice and slow speed, which is what we want. Overall, given all the options you have it around this level, this is not a terrible bow. If you can get it for a reasonable price, this will last you a good amount of levels, probably until you get Verdant's Aim from Maraudon later on, but for level 37, its stats aren't terrible, it does pretty good damage. This is a overall mediocre item. Destiny is a two-handed sword that isn't the worst thing on the planet. It's a little too fast for its own good, sitting at 2.6 speed, but it has quite an amazing chance on hit effect to increase your strength by 200 for 10 seconds. This is a whopping 400 attack power, which is probably doubling the attack power you have at this level. It only lasts for 10 seconds, but it has a proc rate about 1.3 per minute. So your uptime on this is going to be maybe 15% or something. It's good for burst damage. It's not terrible. There's other options like Barbarous Blade out there, which is a little more consistent if it's crit and attack power. Overall, Destiny is in this weird place where it's a usable weapon, but are you going to shell the money for it? Not when other items are out there. Oh, Gut Ripper. This is what a rogue wants two of as soon as they hit level 40, if you can afford it. This is a pretty solid dagger at 1.8 speed, which is very nice, especially for its level. It's got a chance on hit to do like 110 physical damage. With two of these bad boys, you're going to be seeing that go off pretty often. This in general is just not a bad dagger. There's not a lot of other options at that level that are superior to it. Maybe Widowmaker because it has 7 strength, 8 agility. It's a little bit slower. But no, Gut Ripper, I don't really have anything bad to say about it. This is a decent dagger at that level. If you want it, get it. Back in my days, Conger Decapitator was the very first BOE I ever got. Unfortunately, I was playing a hunter and thought it was a good idea to equip it because, oh my god, look at that damage. Oh my gosh, it's purple. This weapon's got a very special place in my heart. It was the very first I ever obtained. The axe itself is not terrible. It's got some pretty slow speed, which is everything a melee wants, especially in Huntsman Shaman. Chance on hit, 560 damage over 30 seconds. Pretty much everything you kill is going to be dead before this gets its full effect off, but when it does go off, it's not terrible damage. But things tend to die within 10 to 15 seconds or most classes, so you're not really going to see a whole value on the chance on hit. Out of all your options around this level, Executioner's Cleaver is going to be dramatically cheaper, gives you 23 strength and 1 hit. This is just objectively better in every way than Kong, but if you can get Kong for a decent price, it's not bad for its level. The Jeweled Amulet of Cainwyn and Lady's May Pennant. Both of these have very similar stats. I'm going to pretty much count them as the same exact item. These both have pretty decent stats that any caster is going to fancy. It's got 10 stam, intel, and spirit, a solid amount of both. Honestly, both items are really fucking close in stats, who cares? The only problem with these two things is you really do want to get plus healing and or hit/spell damage if you're a caster DPS. So while these two, if you can get them for like a really cheap price, they may last you until you get something with, spell power or healing. That's why they're in a B tier. They're not bad, but they're definitely not worth the price and how rare they are and how hard they are. Shadowblade is a epic dagger that has very similar properties to our friend the Gut Ripper. Shadowblade, it is a little bit faster, but it is unfortunately unique, so you can only have one of them equipped. This is a decent offhand dagger that has a chance to send a Shadowy Bolt for 110 to 140 shadow damage, and it is pretty comparable to Gut Ripper as far as how good it is. It's a little bit higher level, so it has raw, more damage, but in general, Shadowblade is a pretty decent offhand for rogues that you might want to grab. Axe of the Deep Woods is a pretty solid main hand axe at a slow 2.7 speed with a chance to hit for 90 to 126 nature damage. This is an item that an orc warrior would definitely like to see. Maybe in Huntsman Shaman, if they're rolling one hand of a shield, this could be pretty reasonable for them. But those are pretty much the two main beneficiaries. Tanks don't really want this if you're a warrior. Outside of it just having pretty decent speed and a chance on hit's not, I guess, terribly awful. It belongs in the B tier as being like a mediocre weapon you can get. Underworld Band is a ring that anyone who's ever played a warlock should be pretty familiar with. This ring is really only useful for warlocks, but because there's such a rarity of rings that have spell power in general up until like endgame, the fact that it gives 14 shadow spell damage is going to last you pretty much until level 60 for a warlock. Even at 60, it's going to take you a little bit to replace this guy. So it's a very solid ring in B tier, but only because it's useful to one class. That's why it belongs in there for me. Starting off our A tier list, we have Argent. Custodian. This is a main hand mace with a pretty fast weapon time at 2.1. Grants 100 armor, gives 5 defense. Any tank wants this. At this level, there is just about no other weapon into endgame that gives you even plus defense. But the fact that it gives you a little bit of armor as well and has pretty fast speed means it'll be decent for race generation. Even if you're a warrior, tanking is going to want this. This, though, is best in slot for Druid because it gives 100 armor. And in vanilla, Druids, their bear form gives you armor based off every single piece of equipment, not just armor. So that's why when you have armor on a weapon, it's really good for Feral Tank. Freezing Band. All my mage homies out there know about this item. It grants a ring that grants a whopping 21 spell damage to Frost. And that's it. His chance on hit, it will freeze the thing in place on a 1% chance basis. But when it freezes him in place like this does not benefit from Shatter, making this effect pretty much completely useless. I don't know when the hell you'd ever want to use this. So the only reason this thing is an A tier because it has 21 spell damage. It's hard to find a ring of that much, especially at 47. You're going to want something like Maiden Circuit at end level or Songstone of Ironforge / whatever. The 21 frost damage only lasts for so long, but it's solid first level, so we're going to keep it here in A. Sash of Mercy is the best healing belt you're going to find for a very long time. It is for paladin healers, druids, shamans, they all want this. It has a whopping 53 healing done on it. Unfortunately, it lacks intellect, but a little bit of spirit if you care about that. The only reason I have it here in A tier is of how rare it is and how marginal of an upgrade it is compared to some other options like Eye Stalk Cord, which gives you a nice amount of intel, or Whipvine Core from Dire Maul is also a solid option with 6 MP5 and intel. You're paying a heavy price to gain like plus 15, 20 healing. You're getting no intel, the 10 spirit's kind of negligible. So it's up to you whether it's worth it or not, but this is in the best of slot for a lot of healing classes. So it's a very solid item, just very rare and very expensive. Skullflame Shield. This is a very unique shield that has 2 different things going for it. When it's equipped, it'll have a chance to lifesteal 35 from an enemy, and also it has another separate chance to do AoE fire damage to everything that's hit. The shield's not really that usable for raiding. Like, if you have no other option, sure, but like, this is really expensive to buy for the raiding purposes. Use this shield to farm. Go get Draconian Deflector if you plan on raiding or doing anything. It's just straight up better than this. Skullflame is strictly for Paladin and for Shaman if you're farming a ton of guys at once, like in Scarlet Monastery. But because both of the effects are so good for that purpose, that's why I have it up here in A rank. Gloves of Holy Might. This is something I had in B tier. I want to move up to A tier now. These are a leather pair of gloves at 37 that give you a nice 1% chance to crit and 20 attack power. What more could you want at this level? If you're a rogue, if you're a hunter, if you're a shaman, if you're a druid, if you're a hunter, there are so many classes that benefit from both of these stats. These gloves will generally last you up until you get Devil Sword Gauntlets for most classes. This is a very solid item that you can usually get for not too expensive on the market. It's definitely not in-game material, but it will last you all the way until 60 just about. Myrmidon Signet. This is a epic ring that has some pretty nice stats on it for a lot of classes. If it weren't so rare and so expensive, this is something that you'd want to equip as soon as you get to 53. But you have 10 strength, 7 agility. This is really what you're paying for. The stamina is completely useless, maybe unless you're tanking. This could be a decent tank ring. But for 10 strength, 7 agility, the price you're paying, absolutely insane. You have Blackstone Ring, which gives you 20 attack power, 1% chance hit. You have Painweaver Band, gives you 1% crit, 16 attack power. These are both just objectively better and are free, unlike this guy. He's here if you can't get either of these rings to drop or have a lot of money, but I personally don't think this is an S tier item. This is a pretty solid A tier. Stockade Pauldron is a very solid piece of shoulder armor that any plate tank, paladin, warrior, both of you guys want this. This is the best in slot shoulder, probably up until basically level 60. There's not a lot of items in the game that give you plus defense on shoulders, though you can get one from Unforgiven or Dire Maul. These simply outclass it in defense stance plus stamina, but it doesn't have any strength on it. That's the only thing that's really stopping it from being an S tier item, is the fact that it gives spirit. So grab these if you can afford them. They're great for tanking until you get something else. Solid item. Starting off the S tier, we have Flurry Axe. I don't have to say too much about this. It's a fast, one-handed axe. Gives you one extra attack on your next swing, which is the best thing you could ever want as a shaman, as a rogue, as a warrior. They all want extra swings, especially warriors. This is an axe that's usually very expensive. You can use it to twink at 49. It'll last you in your offhand slot well into your 60s, depending on your class. Flurry Axe is absolutely fantastic. Cloud Keeper leg plates, something that all plate DPS want in Phase 1. Outside of Phase 1, these are very heavily outclassed by just about everything else, particularly Titanic legs, but we're not going to compare it to these for the purposes of this video. But there's not really a lot of good plate legs in Phase 1, so these stand out with their plus 20 to strength, agility, and stamina. The real reason that people use these is for its on-use effect to gain 100 attack power for 30 seconds. This is really great for burst. It's really great if you're speedrunning in raids. You can equip these, use the effect, switch to another piece of gear every 15 minutes. It's a nice little boost on damage. It is definitely like an S tier item, but because it's so fucking expensive and better stuff comes out after it, I very much debate you really want to use it. It's too hard to get. Meh. Edgemaster's Handguards. You've played vanilla, you know what this item is. This is every warrior's dream come true. In vanilla, weapon skill rate is very important for hitting things that are higher level than you, and bosses by default are plus 3 levels higher than you, like 60. Melee have roughly a 9% chance to miss with spells against targets that are 3 levels higher. If you were to gain even plus 5 more skill, this reduces that down to 6. So the fact that these are so popular, it reduces the hit you need dramatically on bosses. All of your whites are hitting more often, the spells are hitting, you need less hit in your gear. Edgemasters is everything you want as a warrior. Weapon skill is very hard to come by and is absolutely critical for maximum performance. Elemental Mage Staff's another extremely solid staff. It gives you a whopping 36 spell damage to your fire and frost spells. This is pretty much mage exclusive. But because it gives a whopping 36, this is way higher than most staffs can give up to this point in time, and especially if you're being a bind on equipped. Not bad at all. There are staffs like Lord Valak's Staff of Command, which gives you 30 spell power and 1 hit, which eventually you'll want to get, but can be difficult to obtain. Staff of Dominance is the next best staff with like 40 spell power and a bunch of other stats going for it. But Elemental Mage Staff, it gives the most amount of spell power of any main hand offhand combo in Phase 1 as far as I'm aware. There are very few exceptions that beat this. That's pretty much it. Great staff for mages. It's expensive. If you can get it, grab it. It will last you a little while. Crowblade is everything you want on a weapon as a warrior or a rogue, with a whopping slow 2.8 speed, 7 strength, 5 stamina, and, most notably, 1% chance to crit. There are very few weapons that give crit up to this point in time, especially around this level range. There's not really any other main hand weapon you'd want up until level 60, and even at 60, this thing still kicks ass for a little while. There's nothing bad to be said about this blade. You want it. If you're a warrior, you're a rogue, get this if you can afford it. It'll last you quite a while. Staff of Jordan. Oh, it's a beautiful, beautiful item. Very overpowered for level 35, granting you a whopping 26 spell power, 11 intel, 11 spirit. These are all the things we want to see. Anyone that can equip the staff is going to want this, besides a warrior. There's no other staff that gives this amount of spell power until like Zulra's Vexing came, which gives 21, but even that's just worse. This staff more than lasts you to level 60 until you can get something, go some hit or crit on it. This staff is fantastic, and also is after one of my favorite people of all time, Kevin Jordan, one of the original developers of World of Warcraft back in vanilla. He's an absolute lad. Perhaps one of the most legendary epic BOEs of all time will be Tibu's Blazing Longsword. If you've ever bought World of Warcraft and saw the box way back in the day, you know about this bad boy. This is something I've never seen drop personally. It's very rare to ever see even on the auction house, but it has a whopping slow 2.9 speed. It's a sword, it's a main hand, it hits targets for 150 fire damage on occasion. It's got very solid damage. The chance on hit effect is pretty good extra damage. This is definitely an S tier item if you can find it, if you can afford it. It'll last you, but I don't think it's best in slot for anybody. I put it here in S tier largely on the box art, and everybody wants this thing, but it's also a pretty solid weapon, let's be honest. The Eye of Shadow I wasn't really sure if I wanted to include in this list, because it is technically a BOE epic that drops in the world, but it doesn't have any stats on it, and it's just part of something that is a quest for priests when they get their Molten Core Fancy Staff Anathema. So the only reason I'm going to keep it in here, it's an S tier item because it does lead to a best in slot staff for priests. That's pretty much it. Moving on. Warden Staff. This is an S tier item for Feral Druids and Feral Druids only. It's here in S-Tap because this is quite literally the best item for Feral tanks in Vanilla WoW. They will pretty much never replace this if you're tanking. The amount of armor and defense it gives is just invaluable as a Druid. There's not much more to be said about it. No other class really uses it, but because it is such an overpowered item for Druids, it wellfully deserves its place in top tier. Last but not least, Elemental Attuned Blade. This is a beautiful, beautiful main hand piece for all casters, healers, damage dealers. Anyone that can put a sword on will want this item if they can get their hands on it. It being a main hand means you have room for also offhand items, but it gives an absolutely whopping 32 spell power, 3 MP5, 6 intel. These are all the things you want as a caster. Especially at being a one-hand, you have a lot of flexibility on what offhand slot you would like. You can get a ton of more healing power or spell power. All the stuff from AV is fantastic. You really can't go wrong with this item. This is probably one of the best buy-in equips you can get in the entire game, alongside with Edge Masters. But I do have to say, I think Edge Masters takes the cake as being definitely the #1 item on this list.